We've got 10 games to talk about on this slate. It's a core slate, a bunch of popular arms that people are going to want to talk about. So good thing we have Adam here today. Adam, how you doing? How was your weekend?
It was good. I had a friend's 30th birthday party, so hung out with him, hung out with the family yesterday. So it was pretty relaxing. How was yours?
It was good. It was good. I was close yesterday to a really big day, but about 3x, and then got to hang out with some family as I do most Sundays. So yeah, it was a good time, and no complaints here. I'm ready to close out the second half of the season. How do you feel the second half of MLB goes for you in general over these last few years?
I've actually had more success in the second half overall than the first. I don't really know that there's a reason for it. I mean, in theory, it should be more difficult because obviously the beginning of any sports season is the easiest.
Hmm.
But it's just kind of worked out for me that my best, I've just kind of done better in like late July, early August.
Yeah, I feel like that's been the same way for me. Especially last season, I had a rough first half of the season and then a really good second half. But like they say, a lot of people in baseball, especially, they get worn out. So a lot of the casual players, or like the losing players, are kind of dried up once we get to MLB All Star break. So yeah, you got to kind of up your game in the second half, and we're gonna try to do that here with lineup study. But first, we are of course presented by Yahoo. Still time to get in that rake-free tournament, the management fee free tournament, $4,500 in prizes, $3 entry fee, 10 entry max. Again, 0% management fee. Top 300 get paid. Yeah, just under 200 entries left. So if you're watching live, you're going to want to get in that and use the promo code AWESEMO to get $30, up to $30 worth of Yahoo Sports rewards points. And you can find that link in the Spotlight Hitters article that EMAC writes. So go check out all the free content, of course, and then you're going to want to look at the ownership projections for the main slate, night slate, premium content. Lofty will have the deep dive out. And let's take a look at lineup study now. One tournament that we noticed, Adam and I noticed that there were a bunch of popular names at the top because I don't think yesterday was a great day for like the top pros. I don't know if you disagree with that at all, Adam, but it didn't seem like a ton of familiar names up top, except in this tournament, the 22K knuckleball on DraftKings. But did you feel like it was a pretty tough day for the pros?
Yeah, it seemed that way. I mean, I think Tampa Bay kind of not having a great game probably hurt a lot of people. They were obviously really popular. But yeah, looking at the tops of a lot of the tournaments, it wasn't even like, there were one or two people missing that are normally up there. It was kind of everybody.
Yeah, I mean there were a couple guys here and there across the different sites, but yeah, it wasn't a great day. Like, sometimes we come on here and we just talk about how much Alex wins, but I don't think it was a great day for him yesterday. You guys see in this tournament, he put in his 150, as did Adam. Alex cashed 33 out of his 150, so didn't have a bunch of great lineups in this tournament. But the one thing that's pretty good about this tournament is that if your playstyle isn't like all or nothing, you're probably better off playing in a tournament like this on DraftKings rather than like the big $10 because this is a flatter payout structure. I think it pays out more people, and if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, I think the min cash might be closer to 2x than like 1.5x. And Josh in Premium Slack, Josh Engelman said 44 people entered. Max entered the $10 on DK yesterday. Only two made profit. One of those profits was $30. So that just goes to show how tough that tournament is.
Yep.
But is there anything you would have done differently, Adam? I see you got up in 11th place was your best entry, but do you think you played this like you wanted to? Is there anything looking back that you wish you would have had more of?
So, I mean, the one thing that kind of messed me up in this was the Homer Bailey scratch, which I'm sure affected a lot of people, but he was my second highest owned pitcher. And so the result of that
Mm.
was I ended up with more Yuli Chacin than I was going to have, which he did fine. He wasn't an issue at all. But it just like that was one thing that, went wrong. I got more Toronto bats than I really wanted. They were really low owned against, a home run prone pitcher in Tanaka. So I don't think it was the worst spot to be, but I still think I should have probably had a little bit less, just given the boom or bust nature of their offense. The one thing that worked out was that I also had a pretty good amount of Detroit. Again, even though I liked Bailey, he's someone that can get touched up a bit, and Detroit was cheap. Let me get a bunch of DeGrom. Bailey scratching and getting whatever came out of the Kansas City bullpen really put me in a good spot with the Detroit lineup.
Yeah, the Bailey scratch was tough because it was after lock, and it would have been nice if Wainwright was a nice global swap if you could get there, but you would have had to done that through XL, and you would have had a bunch of lineups air out if you had the extra salary left on the table. So you couldn't get right to Wainwright. I think I global swapped to Chassin, and that didn't really work out. But um, yeah, that we haven't had one of those late scratches for a pitcher. It feels like for a couple months now, so we've been pretty lucky with that. But
Yeah, I ended up global swapping to Chassin and then going into late swaptimizer and swapping what Chassin lineups I could to guys that were more
mhm.
expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looking at what Josh just said in chat, a lot of people struggling to get even half their entry fees back in this $10 tournament. A lot of the big names like the Chipotle Addicts, Brick, Alex. Um, I mean, it's just really, really tough when you're playing at Manny. When you're playing a tournament like this, it's really tough to get all your money back or even close to it if you don't have a lineup in the top 5 or 10 entries. Although, Adam, you had, let's see, you cashed 48 lineups in this 150 max $10, and you just lost $11. So that's pretty much a victory in a tournament like that, right?
Yeah, no question. It was I did decent in it because of those Detroit teams. Like for a lot of the day, I had teams, between like 10th and 20th, kind of like fighting to get up toward the top, and didn't get there. But um, yeah, I mean, if you basically in tournaments like this, if I lose, you know, less than like 20%, it feels like a win.
Yeah, for sure. I would take that all day on my losing days. Like, give me 80% back, and I'll just move it on to the next day. But there are those days where you're looking at some of these people and they're losing over 1,000 on their $1,500. It's tough, even when you're playing correctly. I think you're going to have days like that where everything just goes haywire. So not always just touting all the wins here, but it was a rough day, I think, for a lot of recognizable players. So let's move it on to the 10 games we have on the slate. There's some confusion about this Coors game I'm seeing on some other sites as far as who's pitching, but hopefully we have the answer to that by time we get to that game. You ready to start, Adam?
Yep.
Cool. Let's go to the Dodgers and the Phillies. I've got the Osmo.com MLB lineups page open. You guys can go to mlb.lineups.osmo to access this. It is free. You get Alex's team totals when they come out, and you get to see the lineups as they get updated. So Dodgers and Phillies, we have a 5.4 implied total for the Dodgers, 4.2 it looks like for the Phillies. Clayton Kershaw going up against Zach Eflin. Weird pitcher pricing today, kind of all around, especially on the two pitcher sites. But are either of these two guys, Kershaw at 10.7 or Eflin at 8.2, guys you're looking at on DraftKings specifically, and then any other sites?
Not particularly. Definitely not Eflin, just because he's not a high strikeout guy as is, and it's a brutal matchup against the Dodgers. They have a ton of left-handed power, which has been an issue for Eflin basically forever. And this game being in Philadelphia obviously plays up the home runs. Kershaw, of course, is still a really good pitcher, but he just keeps being priced like he's an ace. And you can argue if he's, depending on how you define ace, like in real life, but in DFS, he's just not that guy anymore. He has a 23.5% strikeout percentage this year, still a really low walk percentage, still a really good pitcher with a 3.47 xFIP. But, strikeouts are really king with how DFS scoring is. And it's not that he's like a bad play. It's just that you're kind of paying for his name and you're paying for closer to his ceiling than his median projection these days when you're getting like a 10.7 price tag on DraftKings or $51 on Yahoo or 10.3 on FanDuel. It's not the end of the world if he ends up in some lineups, but from a priority standpoint, there's just guys that I think have better strikeout stuff that are in the same price range.
Yeah, 100%. And that's all I meant by the weird pricing on Kershaw. Like, he's going to grade out as one of the better raw point plays for sure. But you've got Paxton, who's quite a bit cheaper on DraftKings especially, and some other options in the low tier. And I don't know that I'm going to find myself on Kershaw all that much anyways against this Philly team, assuming they roll out a pretty normal lineup. So Kershaw, not really a guy I'm looking at. And then Eflin just has issues versus lefties, and this is about the worst team to have issues versus lefties against because you've got Peterson and Turner, Bellinger, Muncy. That's a pretty tough four. And then you throw in a guy like Verdugo, who's probably going to be in the lineup as well. And it's just a really tough matchup for Eflin. But that said, Dodgers bats actually on the whole don't look that chalky because it is a Coors slate and Coors is pretty affordable. But if you had to say right now, are the Dodgers a top 5 stack? Are they a top 3 stack, somewhere in there?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I mean, you just get so much power here, and they're affordable. So whether it's mini stacks, one-offs, full stacks, I don't think it really matters. Eflin has so far against lefties this year, he's allowed a 275 ISO, a 362 WOBA, and he's struck out just shy of 20% of hitters. So balls in play and getting hit really far for the most part. Really not where you want to be against the left-handed bats in this lineup.
Yeah, seems really tough. And then looking at some of the pricing of the Phillies on Yahoo, they're pretty cheap. I mean, you got Rhys Hoskins for $17, and Real Muto really sticks out for $11. But is this really a team you're looking at as a stack or just kind of bits and pieces here and there?
Yeah, probably just bits and pieces. Not something that I'm really prioritizing, obviously, against Kershaw. You mentioned Real Muto's price, 11 on Yahoo, 3,800 on DraftKings. That's pretty appealing but it is a good mark for hitters. It is just a really talented hitter, Real Muto. And for the most part, in catcher, when you start looking for those cheaper bats, you're going to get, pretty flawed hitters against bad pitching. Just hope for the best. It's kind of the opposite. You have a really talented hitter against a really good pitcher, but you're just getting the best talent in that price range, most likely.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. I think your mic was cutting out just a little bit. It sounded okay to me, but I think some people might be complaining if you want to plug it in and plug it or take it out and plug it right back in or something. But I could basically make out exactly what you're saying. So let's go on to the next game. We've got Tampa Bay and the Yankees. Blake Snell going up against James Paxton. 3.9 implied total for the Rays, 4.7 for the Yankees. That's one of the higher totals you'll see against Snell all season. He's run into a bit of a rough patch lately, and a lot of that has to do with going up against the Yankees. So this will be his third time seeing the Yankees in his last 5 starts. And the Yankees keep getting healthier and healthier, and they look like what you would expect this roster to look like versus lefties. Not really a weak spot here in this entire Yankees lineup, even against a guy as good as Snell. So 10K for Snell. He is getting a little bit of ownership even right now. He's at the mid-teens. But do you see yourself getting to Snell here in this really tough matchup in Yankee Stadium?
I think a lot will come down to ownership. And, as you said, right now he's getting some, which makes him a lot less appealing because it's obviously a brutal matchup against the Yankees. There's plenty of pitching options on this slate. Snell's price tag for his talent is affordable. He's a really, really good pitcher. His price tag had come down a bit just because of recent struggles, but you're just getting a ton of power bats in this Yankees lineup, not a ton of strikeouts against left-handed pitching, and also a negative park shift for Snell going from Tampa Bay into New York. So a lot working against him here. It's tough when you can look to the other side of this game and you have James Paxton for less, who's probably not as good a pitcher as Snell, but he's still a really good pitcher. And in a more favorable matchup, you have other guys that you can look to on the slate as well. So if you were to come in at like 5% or something, then it would be kind of easy to get overweight on him, I think. But if he is going to be 15, 20% owned, it's just a really tough spot.
Yeah, I think people are going to be able to afford him, so they'll just put him in there because they can. Especially if you're not going to Coors, you probably could afford a Snell Paxton combo with relative ease, even stacking a team like Cleveland, who's not very expensive but has a high implied total. Boston's priced down as well, especially their bats near the bottom. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough one for me for Snell. It will depend a lot on ownership. I mean, you're obviously getting a huge talent in Snell that's not getting a ton of ownership, but the talent on the other side is just as good, 1 through 8, really. Stopping at Gleyber Torres. Wouldn't really include Brett Gardner in that category, but the rest of these guys are really, really awesome. Paxton, the chalkiest pitcher on the slate right now. I don't think that's going to be a huge surprise. He's had the 12 strikeout game mixed in with a bunch of other so-so starts lately. I mean, he's been fine, but he's one that he hasn't gone over 6 innings one time since, let's see, April 16th. He hasn't gone over 6 innings. Does that concern you at this price tag here?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not ideal. They are keeping him pretty much right around the 100 pitches. The most he's thrown in any start over the last 10 was 108 on June 16th. So he's just not going to get that, like Trevor Bauer or Chris Sale treatment where he gets that extra inning if he's right around 100 pitches. But he's still, a good strikeout pitcher. His price tag is really what's the most appealing, though. 9,300 on DraftKings, $44, I think it is, on Yahoo. That's just too cheap of a price tag for the third highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 28.9%. Elevated walk percentage isn't ideal, but overall just a good pitcher, and he's facing a Tampa Bay team that does have plenty of strikeouts in the lineup. He's had his issues this year, but that's really the case with most pitchers. So he's, like you said, he's projected to be the most popular. I expect him to be my highest owned pitcher as well.
Yeah, and it's not like he's the most popular in a landslide. I mean, he's a few percentage points above some of the other cheap guys that you would expect to be popular just because of their price tag. So he's a price and a talent and somewhat of a matchup play. Yankee Stadium isn't ideal for anyone, but it's a better park for lefty pitching than it is for righty pitching, especially if you give up any power. So I'm going to get to Paxton quite a bit. If you are looking to leverage against either of these pitchers, do you have any bats in mind that you want to point out?
I mean, the Yankees' entire team, I think, is viable as a stack, especially if Snell's going to have ownership and the Yankees are going to be low. It's just, I mean, so we talk about it a lot, but especially in these larger field tournaments like the $10 that you were talking about, where it's really, really difficult to grind out any sort of profit unless you're, getting like first or second or something. There's a lot of merit to kind of not worrying too much about the opposing pitcher and just trying to get as much talent into your lineup, as much upside as you can. And the Yankees, of course, give you that. Just because if Snell's not at his best, they will destroy pretty much anyone that they face. But on the other side with Tampa Bay, Tommy Pham, Travis d'Arnaud, the two that stick out the most. d'Arnaud obviously gives you another cheap catcher option. If you didn't want to go to Real Muto against Kershaw in that mid 3K range, you can get to Travis d'Arnaud, probably hitting toward the top of the Rays lineup.
Yeah, I'd throw in Avisel Garcia against Paxton too, if he's batting in the top 6 or so. But yeah, you mentioned the Yankees stack. Like, they've already done it against Snell one time, his only start in Yankee Stadium this season. So they got him out within the first inning, 6 earned runs. So, just a mega talented team against a pitcher who still can be volatile, even if he's been a ton better the last year and change. So I like the call on the Yankee stack, especially in large field tournaments, like if you're playing in that $10 again today on DraftKings. Blue Jays and the Yankees, we have a 4.5 implied total for the Jays, 6.1 for the Red Sox. Right now, that is, I believe, the second highest total of games we have totals for. It's going to depend on the Wrigley win game and then the Coors game as well. But Red Sox total way up there. Their prices are not, but we've got Thornton and Porcello on the mound, both cheap. I am guessing we're going to have some interest in Porcello, as will the field. And then this game's probably going to be all about Yankees bats, right?
Red Sox bats.
I'm sorry, yeah, Red Sox bats.
Yeah, I mean, Porcello isn't very good, but he's cheap enough where, I'll take some shots on him in tournaments just because Toronto's not the worst matchup in the world. There are some strikeouts, and it's just an appealing price point for Porcello, despite all of his flaws. On the other side, Thornton's been good against right-handed hitters this year, but it's just obviously a really, really tough spot going in and facing the right-handed hitters that are in this Boston lineup in Fenway. And then on top of that, he's really struggled with lefties. You have Rafael Devers, who is just hitting absolutely phenomenal this season, or, at least after the first month or so. I think there's a stat that he has the most hard hit balls in all of the major leagues this year. So he just continues to hit really well. He's really expensive. That tends to keep his ownership down, but I think he's a really good play as a one-off or as part of a stack. Benintendi's affordable. Jackie Bradley's still affordable. So it's just a really good offense against a pitcher who they should be able to have success against.
Yeah. And just the pricing is really, really good, especially on Betts and JD. I know it's against a righty, and not the worst righty in the world, but 4,800 and 4,700 for these guys. It's just crazy, honestly. Like I said, they're more appropriately priced on FanDuel, where each of these guys are all above 4K. Looking at their Yahoo pricing, the top 4 are all $20 or above. So you're getting some more dynamic pricing on the Red Sox here with the 6 implied total on the sites not named DraftKings, which usually you see that the other way around. But those guys are going to be affordable. Those guys are going to be popular as fillers, especially if people are paying down for pitching. You're going to be able to afford them. But I love this Red Sox stack. I think they would be a top 2 or 3 stack at the very least right now, and possibly my number 1 exposed stack by the time we get to lock. You want to talk about Porcello at all? Do you like this matchup for him against the Blue Jays? Righties going against the Blue Jays has been pretty profitable.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. The Jays obviously have some strikeouts. They have a pretty boomer bust lineup, so it's not really that tough for pitchers to have success if they can keep the ball in the park. The scary thing for Porcello, though, is that against righties this year, he's only struck out about 21%. Against lefties, he's at 15.5%. So not good strikeout numbers there. And then a 200 expected ISO against righties, 231 expected ISO to lefties. So in addition to not getting strikeouts, he's giving up power. And we're talking about a Toronto team that does strike out, does have guys that aren't the best getting on base, but also has a lot of power. I mean, you look from really Lourdes Gurriel projected to hit third down through the entire rest of the lineup, Biggio, Guerrero, Smoke, Richard, Jansen, Hernandez. These guys all have power, and that Porcello is not going to strike them out and is going to make mistakes over the plate season. And there is upside there. So I think that actually like the bottom half of the lineup for Toronto is going to be pretty appealing in tournaments because you get Guerrero, Smoke, Grichuk, all at cheap price tags, Danny Jansen as well. So you're getting a lot of power upside there without having to spend too much money.
Yeah, talk about a really nice leverage stack that it's not going to be an optimizer play for sure. It is a decent implied total for Toronto, but because of the way this lineup at least projects to be with Vlad, Smoke, Grichuk, 5, 6, and 7, they're not going to be great values or anything that are going to pop up a lot, and they will get you a decent amount of leverage off of Porcello, who is right now just under 25% ownership. So actually, once we start going through all these guys, the Junises, the Musgroves, we can talk about kind of who's our front runner right now as far as who we have the most exposure to. But but a mix of chalky pitchers after Paxton, which will be interesting. All right, let's move it on to the Tigers and the Indians. We have Daniel Norris going up against Adam Plutko. 4.4 implied total for the Tigers, 6.2 for Cleveland. This is the highest implied total we have out right now. Would expect the Rockies to be a little bit above that. Norris, Plutko, I was looking at these two guys last night to see if we could play either one of them, just because Norris is a $4,200 pitcher. But I didn't really find anything that makes me want to play him. I don't know. I mean, Cleveland bats are going to be obviously a play we're going to want to target here, but is there any merit in playing Daniel Norris for $4,200 outside of his price?
It's solely the price. I mean, it's not a good strikeout matchup against Cleveland. It's not a great pitcher by any stretch in Norris, but at the same time, he's $4,200, and I can kind of assume that I'll probably end up with him in lineups just because he's that cheap and he'll let me get that, and he'll pair with an ace. So I'll have some, I would assume, but it's not like I'm like excited about it or saying, if you don't have Daniel Norris in your lineup, you did something wrong.
Yeah, right now he's actually 12% ownership. So interesting. I wonder if he's going to be the optimizer play. If so, then Cleveland just becomes it's going to shoot way up for me at least. I'm looking at these Cleveland bats right now, just doing a quick look. I don't see, man, is Lindor the chalkiest bat on DraftKings right now at 9%? Is that right? I think it is.
Really?
Yeah, so on the first round of ownership, we've got 9% for Lindor, 8% for Leplo and Ramirez. But,
do we not have like the Rockies in because of the Coors game because like there's no total or something?
No, the Coors game is in there. Coors game is in.
Oh, wait, you meant chalkiest from the Indians.
What's that?
You meant chalkiest bat from the Indians, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now
I'm following.
Lindor, no one above 10% right now for Cleveland bats. If that sticks, I mean, Coors looks incredibly popular right now for a 10-game slate. We're seeing a couple guys flirt with 30% ownership for hitters, a bunch of guys over 20%, and a couple of bad hitters. Honestly, I see Steven Vogt around 20% ownership at $4,200. So this will be interesting to see if some of these other teams just go under owned. So top stack tool, of course, going to be a big part of my process today. I'll be studying that, putting that in my spreadsheet, and seeing who's coming in over and under owned relative to their chances of being the top stack. But what do you think about Cleveland here against Norris? You mentioned you might have some Norris, so we can kind of get that out of the way. $4,200 pitcher. I think we're both of a similar mindset. But what do you think about Cleveland here against Norris?
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland's a team that I don't really stack all that much, but they do have a 6+ implied run total, and like you said, they're kind of going overlooked right now because of the Coors game. So they are appealing. Lindor, of course, is a good play. You're probably going to get Jordan Luplow in the middle of the lineup, has some power. Ramirez is still affordable. Roberto Perez is kind of having a resurgence as a power hitter this season. So it's just an ugly lineup kind of to full stack, but at the same time, that probably does keep the ownership down a little bit. Having Carlos Santana in there as a $5,000 first baseman hitting third should kind of keep the stacks down a bit too, because that's clearly an overpriced option. So if they're going to be low owned, I'm happy to get there. But if they were to get more ownership, there's going to be spots that I like more.
Sure. Makes sense. Looking at Plutko on the other side, I think he's just a little bit too expensive for me. It is a quality matchup against Detroit. Anytime you have a righty going against them, one of the worst teams in the MLB versus righties. But now they've got some of these lefties in this lineup. It's a little bit more balanced. And then Plutko just not striking out anyone, under 18% K rate for the season. So I don't think I'm going to get to him at just under 8K on DraftKings. I think there are some more appealing options that are cheaper. What do you think about Plutko?
I think a lot will depend on the lineup because, like you said, they do have more lefties now. More switch hitters, more lefties in there. For his career, he's actually been really good against righties. 23.3 or 23% strikeout percentage, 4.4% walk percentage, 328 WOBA allowed. But against lefties, he's only struck out 12.9%. He's allowed a 389 WOBA. So a big thing here, I think, will be how many righties are actually in the lineup for Detroit, because he's not expensive, but he's kind of priced to his ceiling. He's not a great pitcher overall, so need a lot to be working in your favor outside of just the fact that Detroit's not good no matter who's in the lineup. Strikeout wise, he's expensive enough that you're still going to need to get some strikeouts.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's move it on to the Wrigley game. We've got Cincinnati and the Chicago Cubs. Luis Castillo going up against Kyle Hendricks. Castillo at almost 12K, 11.8 on DraftKings. Hendricks at 9,500. For me, looking at these two guys right now, I think Hendricks is probably priced out of play for me. I just don't think he's a $9,500 pitcher. And then you throw in that this has the possibility to have a crazy total by time we get to lock, depending on what we see with the weather in Chicago. Right now, it is 86 degrees or so, and there's 15-mile-an-hour winds blowing out straight out to center. So we know that the wind affects Wrigley more than a lot of other stadiums, so that's going to affect the total if the winds rise or die down or whatever. But anyways, we've got Castillo at 11.8 with a 5.2 implied total against him. I didn't realize just how good Castillo has been this season, essentially giving up very little power. I know he's given up a few home runs here and there, but he's just been incredible all season. So I don't think I want to target a ton of Cubs, even if this is a Wrigley win game. What do you think about this game overall, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at too. It's two good pitchers. Castillo has made some strides this year as far as keeping the ball in the park, not making as many mistakes over the plate to left-handed hitters like he was in the past. Has really good strikeout stuff. The only real issue that you have with him is that he walks more guys than you would like. Outside of that, he's just a really, really good pitcher. Hendricks, has always been a guy who doesn't strike out a ton of hitters, 21.5% strikeout percentage this year, but he doesn't put a lot of extra guys on base either. Only about a 4.8% walk percentage, reasonable 4.19 xFIP. Just not an appealing spot for either team. Though the wind blowing out does make it a little bit more appealing, obviously. And the Reds are really, really cheap, which makes them kind of interesting. You have Scooter Gennett at 3,100, you have Suarez at 39, Votto at 34. So they're kind of interesting, especially if you do get a fully healthy lineup with Jesse Winker and Yasiel Puig in there. Dietrich, if Dietrich's back there as well. So a really, really cheap Cincinnati team with the wind blowing out, but it's not like it's a spot where I think they come through all that often.
Yeah, okay. I think the one thing about the Reds, I think more and more about the top stack tool as the season's gone on and just trying to predict which stacks will be over-owned based on their price. I think Cincinnati might be that stack, that value stack that just goes a little over-owned because you mentioned their price, and especially if we get Puig in there for 41, Winker leading off for 33, and then Suarez under 4K as well. I know, like individually, not like nut matchups or anything against Kyle Hendricks, who is a decent real life pitcher. Really frustrating for DFS at times, but I would imagine the Reds get a bunch of ownership just because of their prices alone, and because it's not like they have a sub 4 implied total going up against an ace. I mean, it's Kyle Hendricks we're talking about here, so this one I think it's tough to talk about right now just because the totals could go up. I mean, the total could go up another run or two very easily because it's Wrigley. So just keep an eye out for this one. I don't think there are any weather concerns. It's just hot, and that wind is going to be difficult to navigate. So pay attention to that. Maybe Alex will put out a tweet on the Osmo Weather account, an account you guys should all follow because he tells you exactly how weather is affecting his process.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Reds too. It just kind of jumps out as one of those, an optimizer stack basically, where like if you're prioritizing pitching, it's going to be really easy to get whatever you want. And the Cubs really are kind of the same way. Like they're not as cheap as the Reds, but they're clearly not priced for a Wrigley win game either. Schwarber at 3,600, Baez and Bryant and Rizzo all 4,200 or less. Like Rizzo's the most expensive guy on the team at 4,200. So both of these teams are really not priced for the weather in this game. And I think that like that obviously makes them appealing. But I think there's a good chance that they just end up being higher owned than they really should, given the pitchers that they're facing.
Agreed. All right, let's go to the Braves and the Brewers. We've got Max Fried going up against Adrian Hauser. 5.1 implied total for the Braves. 5.1 as well for the Brewers. This is a 50-50 game right now. It does have cheap pitching, but we've also got some bad matchups, really, on both sides. I would imagine you're going to have some interest in Fried. I think he's been a guy that you've been on a little bit throughout the season, but do you want to talk about Fried here? And then I would think I'm also going to get to some Adrian Hauser for 5,300 just because he's 5,300 and somewhat stretched out. But what do you think about the pitching here in this game? Any guys you want to target?
Fried's a pitcher that I think is good. He's done a really good job this year of limiting barrel balls on balls in play. His strikeouts have come down a little bit from where he was in the past, but he's also improved his walk percentage. Overall, he's at 23.2% strikeout percentage, 6.5% walk percentage, 3.37 xFIP. So it's a tough matchup against Milwaukee, but in tournaments, what I think is interesting, and we had talked about how Kershaw is still a good pitcher, but he's not the great DFS pitcher he used to be. For the season, Max Fried's strikeout percentage is essentially identical to Kershaw's. His xFIP is 0.1 runs better. His walk percentage is slightly higher. But he's $3,000 or $3,500 less expensive than Kershaw is, and in tournaments where you're just trying to get upside, that's pretty valuable. So Fried's not a top play for me because of the park and the matchup, but I still think that he's a viable tournament option just because he's relatively inexpensive. He does a good job of limiting power. He's only allowed a 128 expected ISO to righties this year, a 0.09 expected ISO to lefties. He's just been a pretty good pitcher as far as limiting production, and he does have some strikeout.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned all the reasons that I have interest in Fried tonight. Right now, he's at a pretty nice ownership of under 20% on our main slate ownership projections. So he's not quite in that second tier after Paxton with all the cheap guys because he's priced up a little bit, and I'm assuming that's going to be the difference or the decision people make if they can afford that extra $1K to $1,500 to get up to Fried from guys like in that Musgrove range. There's also another guy that's getting more ownership than Fried that's a little bit more expensive for the Royals in Junis. So, yeah, you mentioned the matchup not being great. It's not really great for either side. Uh, I mean, Hauser, 5,300. We would expect him to be able to go pretty deep in this game. He threw 87 pitches in his last start. He hasn't really done much of anything from a DFS perspective besides kill my lineups when I played him. But he's still priced at 5,300. It's a bad matchup against Atlanta, but I know I'm going to play a good amount of Adrian Hauser because Alex seems to like him in his projections, and you see why. He's got a decent K percentage. And if you have that and you're 5,300 and you have the ability to go 5+ innings, which I think he does here, if things go well, then you're going to end up on a lot of my lineups. So anything for Hauser?
I'd be kind of surprised if I get there, just because I think that I'm going to end up with him probably projected a little bit too close to Daniel Norris.
Okay.
Not that I think again, not that I think Norris does well, but I just think that given the $1,100 drop from Hauser to Norris, I'll probably end up like preferring Norris, and then or finding the money to get up to like a Porcello or Musgrove or someone like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, Norris and him are going to project similarly, just a higher implied total against Norris. So maybe raw points wise, you give Hauser a little bit of a bump there
Yeah.
on Norris, but when you factor in the amount of like the difference in a bat you could get with that $1,100, that might make all the difference, and you might end up on more Norris, even though it's pretty ugly both ways. What about stacking here? Do you have a preferred stack going up against Fried or Hauser?
I prefer the Brave side just because Fried has done such a good job of limiting power this year, and a lot of the bats that you really want, or I mean, not a lot, but two of the bats that you really would want from Milwaukee are obviously Yelich and Moustakas, who do not have the platoon advantage here, and Fried's been really good against lefties, so it kind of just weakens Milwaukee. Whereas on the other side, you have it's right-handed heavy Atlanta lineup, but they have a lot of power. They have Freddie Freeman from the left side. I think that I would just lean towards Atlanta because Hauser is a more questionable pitcher to me than Fried is.
All right, I like it. Let's go to Pittsburgh and the St. Louis Cardinals. We've got Joe Musgrove on the mound, chalky Joe Musgrove on the mound for $5,800 going into St. Louis against Miles Michaelis, who is at 8K. Weather concerns right off the bat. This is the one game, of course, because it's got the cheap chalky pitcher in it that has, there's a question of whether or not this game is even going to play. So keep an eye on the weather. Follow your favorite weatherman, or I would suggest following the Osmo Weather account again. But it looks like we're going to have a pretty chalky Musgrove if this one can get in. $5,800 here, Adam. Do you see yourself getting over the field, around the field, or are you kind of going on the other side and playing Cardinals bats?
I'll probably end up around the field, if not a little bit higher, if the weather cooperates here. Musgrove is just still really cheap, and he's a guy who I've always thought was a pretty good pitcher, and he struggled to start this year. But listening to, I think it was 2 or 3 starts ago now, they mentioned on a Pirates broadcast that he was still kind of having trouble after having hip surgery in the offseason. He was still kind of having trouble getting everything going, and it was affecting his velocity. And if you look at his starts, his average fastball velocity, his most recent start was 92.6 miles an hour, which was actually down from the two prior to that at 93.5. But at the beginning of this year, he was 90.9, 90.5, 90.9. He didn't even get above 91 until his 5th start of the season. So we've seen him pretty consistently jump now into that 92.5 to 93.5 mile per hour range on his fastball. We've seen the results get a bit better, and then on top of that, most of the dangerous hitters in the St. Louis lineup are right-handed. He's allowed a 310 expected WOBA, 176 expected ISO, but the thing that stands out is a 23.7% strikeout percentage against righties this year compared to 15.5% against lefties. So, the Cardinals do have talented bats, but when you look at the middle of the order and it's something like Jose Martinez, DeYoung, Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, who strikes out an insane amount of the time, you get some strikeout upside there. And then lefties being, guys like Wieters and Wong and Fowler isn't really the scariest matchup either. So I just think, Musgrove probably should be in that same price point as like Max Fried. And instead he's at a similar price point to Adrian Hauser and Rick Porcello.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance Musgrove is my highest owned pitcher right now. I don't see a lot of reasons to go against him outside of weather concerns. So if this game has if Alex posts at 6 Eastern or 6:30 Eastern and says that there's a 25% chance of this game going. That's going to be really, really frustrating because I'm probably not going to get to a lot of Musgrove, even though there is a good chance that the game plays because of the way that I adjust my projections for weather. So I'm hoping this one just, looks pretty clean or maybe a little dicey, but we're just going to end up playing it because I want to play a lot of Musgrove for 5,800. I think I agree with this chalk here. Going up against the Cardinals, where would you think the Cardinals rank as far as WRC plus versus righties, this active roster?
They are.
Oh, you're looking it up? No, don't look it up. Where do you
Oh,
think?
I have it in front of
Oh, okay.
me. Really bad.
Yeah. Does that surprise you at all?
Kind of, but I mean, when you go through it, like, because like they don't have Molina right now. Uh, it's just, I mean, it's kind of ugly. Like Tyler O'Neill, I'm sure hurts that because he hasn't been the best in the majors. Like the only guys in this lineup that are any good are Carpenter, DeYoung, Goldschmidt, and then Jose Martinez. Kind of. It's a pretty weak lineup right now.
Are the Cardinals a good real life team? Because I have no clue where their record is.
I
Like,
have no idea.
but this suggests maybe they're
But
they're pretty bad. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I know they're watered down right now. Like they don't have Molina, they don't have Ozuna.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is the active roster, so they're missing a couple guys.
But I mean, overall, they've been disappointing this year anyway. Like, think about the guys, some of the guys that are having the most disappointing seasons from a DFS standpoint, and you have Carpenter and Goldschmidt both at the top.
Yeah. Just one game over 500 right now for the Cardinals, so thoroughly average. And this lineup looks a little bit below average. So yeah, gonna be a lot of Musgrove. Hoping that weather looks pretty clear by the time we get to lock. And hopefully that scares some other people off if it does look clear, because people hate dealing with the weather, especially lately. When you see the Twitter tirades about weather touts and such. Any bats you want to target here? We didn't really talk about Michaelis. I'm assuming that's probably not going to be a guy that either of us get to for 8K.
Yeah, I don't really see it. I mean, you're talking about a pitcher who has an 18% strikeout percentage this year, facing a Pirates team that really doesn't strike out much at all. They have their active roster has the third lowest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. So not really a spot that I'm getting to.
Yeah.
He's not a bad pitcher though. I mean, if you wanted some Josh Bell because he's a monster and he has the platoon advantage, then by all means. But overall, probably just not gonna get the bats.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Just Josh Bell. I mean, we continue to say how good he's been this season, but can't really be overstated. He's been amazing. And this Pirates lineup is just tough, not one that I want to target against, especially with the low K pitcher in Michaelis. So a weird pricing there. I didn't know if I was missing something on Michaelis's recent results or why he all of a sudden is priced at 8K when he's been mid sixes lately. But he doesn't even go deep. Like he hasn't gone over 100 pitches in his last 6 starts. Just not a guy I'm really worried about rostering on this slate. White Sox and the Kansas City Royals, these are going to be guys we're probably going to roster tonight, or at least one side. 4.4 implied total for the White Sox, 4.2 for the Royals here. Weather, pretty moderate. Looks like some wind blowing in Kauffman Stadium. Just 80 degrees, so not super hot and humid day in Kansas City. But we've got Giolito and Jake Junis on the mound. Junis is going to be one of the more popular options at 7,500. Our own Josh Engelman just said in chat that this is a dream spot for Junis. Would you agree with that, Adam?
No.
Why not?
So I mean, it's a dream spot in that the White Sox strike out a lot,
Yeah.
but I think it's actually kind of a scary spot because Junis. So the White Sox have power, and they strike out a lot, and Junis gives up home runs and doesn't strike out a lot of guys. So it's kind of whichever way you think this is going to go. Like, is he going to start racking up strikeouts, or is he just going to be pitching the contact against a bunch of guys that have power? For the season, he has struck out 21% of righties, 20.7% of lefties, 202 ISO to lefties, 211 to righties. And as flawed as the White Sox are, Moncada's got a ton of power. Abreu's got power. Jimenez has a ton of power. McCann has some power. The 3 guys you're really worried about are Moncada, Abreu, and Jimenez. But I don't know. I think that it's a good spot. I still think it's pretty scary though.
I don't think I see myself matching the field on Junis right now if he's going to be over this 20% threshold. I think like you mentioned, it is a good strikeout matchup, assuming Junis is going to be trying to get strikeouts. But it's not like there's going to be just a righty loaded lineup in here. I'm seeing Sanchez, AJ Reed, possibly in this lineup, John Jay. You got Moncada and Lurie Garcia probably leading off there. So possibly more lefties than righties in this lineup. And then maybe Zach Collins, if he's in the lineup as well. There could be up to 6 lefties here for Junis, which I wouldn't be all that interested in playing for a 25% ownership tax for a $7,500 pitcher in Junis. So he's gotten a price bump recently. You've seen him quite a few times, sub 7K or low 7Ks. Now mid 7Ks at 7,500. He's going around 100 pitches each start, but he's not a guy that goes super deep. He's not a guy with the big strikeout spikes, I guess. You're seeing him get up to 7, and he's gotten to 8 one time in his first start this season. So it is a fair price for Junis. It's a decent strikeout matchup depending on what type of lineup the White Sox roll out, but definitely scary. So I don't know if it's a dream matchup, but it appears the field thinks it is a really good one. So 20.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So I mean, I think it's a good matchup. But what's interesting to me is that right now we have Junis projected at 24% ownership, and we have Adam Plutko projected at 5% ownership. Is it really that different? It's two completely mediocre pitchers facing really bad offenses where you're hoping that they win out. It's like the same spot, but Junis is getting way more ownership.
Yeah, I mean, they have the exact same implied totals against right now. Alex's totals may differ once his projections come out. But right now, exact same Vegas implied totals against. Plutko is $300 more. I mean, you could go down to Max Fried for $300 less than Junis. It's not that different of a matchup for him. I don't know. Is it just the White Sox that are, is it just the opponent being the White Sox that's garnering this much ownership for Junis? I don't really see why he's like the guy everyone's on right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably because the White Sox active roster has the highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. And outside of a few power bats, they do have kind of watered down lineup. Like, since they don't have Alonso anymore, that, takes that out of there. But I just think that Junis is priced for the matchup, basically.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's a bad play. Like, he's a perfectly fine play. But you're not really getting any sort of discount on him, and people are there. So I'm kind of more interested in either just pivoting to Plutko against the Tigers, which we know is still a good matchup, or saving some money and going somewhere else.
Yeah, I think just ownership-wise, Plutko right now makes for the best pivot. Like you mentioned, similar spot. He's a way bigger favorite right now. Plutko is minus 200 almost compared to Junis, who's a dog. So,
here's not that game logs mean anything, but just kind of to make a point. Like, if you just go and look at Junis's last 10 starts, not a single start in there where at $7,500, if you didn't roster him, you would really be screwed.
Okay.
And there are plenty of starts where if he's 25% owned and you didn't roster him, you're in great shape.
Yeah, I mean, it's max in those last 10 he got almost 24 DK points, which is really good. Right. I mean, if he does that,
you're happy.
Yeah, but I still think you could get similar production from someone like Fried or Plutko, who's in a really good matchup, even if he's not a great pitcher right now. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be tough for me to get to a bunch of Junis. I'm really interested to see where his ownership stands once we get to the deeper dive and the Live Before Lock shows later this afternoon. Let's go to Coors. And this is the second part of a doubleheader, so we're not exactly sure who's going for the Rockies especially. It looks like for the Giants, it is tentatively going to be Derek Rodriguez. And then for Colorado, the guy I saw on Fangraphs at least was Chichi Gonzalez. And I don't have his price in front of me because he's not listed on our site because he's not the official projected starting pitcher. But have you seen anyone for Colorado for this second part of the doubleheader?
I'm seeing... So DraftKings also has Gonzalez listed as probable, and he's 4,600.
Oh, God. Okay, so $4,600 Chichi Gonzalez. I think I've played him once or twice this season. Maybe he's only started once or twice this season, but he was dirt cheap, and I think he was in Coors, and maybe it could have been against the Giants. But anyways, is he stretched out at all?
It's against the Giants or Texas or something. but he's made, yeah, 2 starts, gone a total of 9 innings for the Rockies. He's made 14 starts in AAA, total of 81 innings. So, yeah, he's stretched out, but he's also not good.
Yeah, he's low K guy. Giants aren't a great K matchup, and it's in Coors. So I was just wondering if maybe we were going to get to any of him if he is indeed the starter, which we still might. But we've got some chalky Giants bats because of their pricing, really. I mean, they're not great bats. Brandon Belt is a good hitter, and then everyone else is just priced down, like Crawford and Joe Panic. If he's in the lineup, I think he's really cheap. Um, Stephen Vogt was one of the guys that I'm kind of going to be avoiding tonight, but do you like these Giants bats? Assuming it is Gonzalez, and then where do the Rockies rank for you against Derek Rodriguez?
Yeah, I like the entire game just because you're getting two pitchers who really don't even belong in the major leagues. For Rodriguez, it's obviously a huge park downgrade going from San Francisco to Colorado. Gonzalez just doesn't miss any bats. The Giants don't have a lot of power, but it's as big a park upgrade as you can get. Belt obviously is a good hitter. Longoria has power still outside of San Francisco. Alex Dickerson, if he's back in the lineup, has some pop. So it's a lot of not very good hitters, but they should be affordable and they're in a good spot. And then for the Rockies, it's kind of their normal lineup where you have Blackman through Dahl. They're all really, really good hitters. And then you get to guys that still have some potential with Desmond, Murphy, McMahon. So Colorado, I think, pretty clearly a top stack.
Yeah, I would think they're going to have the highest implied total on the slate once we get an implied total here against Rodriguez. So Rodriguez is not stretched out. That actually may not be a great thing for Rockies hitters because you'd want to go up against him. He just can't miss any bats. Even out of the bullpen, 14.5 K percentage for the season. He wasn't missing bats last year when he was starting. Just not a very good pitcher. So I think the Rockies should be considered a top stack. Hard to really.
Why do you say Gonzalez isn't stretched out?
What's that? No, Rodriguez.
Why do you say Gonzalez isn't stretched out?
Rodriguez isn't.
Oh, Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, if I said Gonzalez, I meant Rodriguez. But just because Derek Rodriguez hasn't been pitching, he hasn't been starting this season. I was wondering why I hadn't heard anything about him because he was someone I loved targeting against last season when he was starting. But I'm seeing a lot of his recent outings be like a third of an inning, 1 innings, 2 innings here and there.
Yeah, 77 pitches July 10th at AAA.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe he is stretched out then.
Yeah, he went 58 pitches July 5th and then 77 July 10th.
Oh, okay. I had Fangraphs open and I only had the majors. So, okay, so he must have went and gone to AAA and started. Yeah, because his last appearance in the majors was June 30th, which is over a couple weeks ago. Okay, that makes sense. You're not playing Rodriguez, though, right?
No.
Yeah, okay, I didn't think so. I don't think so either. Just a very bad pitcher going into Coors with a likely 6.5, 7 implied total against him somewhere in there. Rockies are cheap, man. If the pricing could be the pricing's tough depending on which lineup site you're looking at right now. Our site has Tapia, Story, Dahl, Murphy, Desmond, 42, 55, 49, 49, and 4,400. So those are pretty affordable prices, assuming those are the right ones because there is a showdown slate earlier today. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but these doubleheaders are always tricky for the lineups pages. But are those the correct prices you're seeing?
Yeah, 49 on Dahl, 55 on.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So they're just affordable and got to be one of the top stacks of the night. Anything else on this game before we move it on to the last one?
Nope. I mean, they're going to be really popular, but I think that they should be. So I'm not planning on avoiding this game just for ownership reasons.
Me either. All right. Astros and the Angels. We've got Josh James going up against Griffin Canning. 5.3 implied total for the Astros, 4.8 for the Angels. James at 9,100, Canning at 9K. Are either of these pitchers on the table for you right now at these prices against teams that don't strike out a lot, just dangerous teams in general, and you're not getting a discount on really either one? But unless I'm missing something here, do you like either of these guys for DK especially?
Not really, just because of the matchup. Like I like both pitchers. James has good stuff. Canning, I think, is good and will be legitimately good going forward. but both of these teams really tough to strike out. The Angels have their active roster has the lowest strikeout. They're tied with the Astros for the lowest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching, both at 18.2%. The Angels with a 123 WRC plus, Houston at 117. It's just not a spot where I feel like I need to be paying up for pitching.
Agreed. So I'd rather go like I know I don't love Junis with all the factors involved, but I'd rather pay $1,500 or $1,600 less than get to either of these guys in bad strikeout matchups. I mean, simply put. But then again, I don't love full stacking either of these teams. Really, these are two quality pitchers at the very least. But do you have interest in stacking up one or both of these teams, and then if not, any one-off hitters you like outside of the obvious, Trout, Otani type guys?
I have interest in both teams just because I imagine that they'll have very little ownership on this slate. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the Yankees in these large field, top heavy tournaments. Anytime you can get low ownership on, a team with a 118 WRC plus or a 123 WRC plus, and they're facing good but not great pitchers, I think it's a spot that you should at least be considering. Canning in particular gives up power too. Like he's a good strikeout guy, but for the season he's allowed 239 ISO to lefties, 236 to righties. Obviously, guys like Springer, Altuve, who's still really cheap, Bregman at only 4,400. I mean, Houston's pricing is really cheap. Like it's probably correct given the fact that like the Rockies are not as expensive as they should be, but you're getting really nice price tags on an Astros team where nobody's over 5K. Nobody on the Angels is over 5K except for Mike Trout, who may miss this game. But yeah, so I mean, I think that especially the Astros here are an appealing stack in large field tournaments.
Okay. Yeah, pretty decent pricing there on DraftKings, especially. Altuve's price still broken. I know he hasn't been great, but 3,800 for him. You got Brantley at 4K as an outfielder. That's also a pretty nice spot. So yeah, maybe Houston if I had to choose one of these two, especially if Trout's out. He left the game early yesterday. He was like 70+% owned on that late slate. I only know that because my brother was playing and he was complaining about Trout having a 0 and didn't know he left. But yeah, so who knows what's going on with Trout? I didn't see. Do you know what injury it was?
It's a calf injury.
Yeah, they're not going to risk him. I would guess he's not playing if he couldn't finish the game yesterday, but that's just my guess.
So Josh James isn't stretched out at all.
Oh, is he not?
He hasn't. I kind of thought maybe he just gone down and stretched out, but he hasn't pitched in the minors. He
went 2 innings on. Yeah, okay, that's right. He went 2 innings 2 days ago with 4 strikeouts.
Is he opening for Valdez?
That could be it. I don't see. Let's see. Is it Valdez?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They've got him in the FC player pool. That's why. FC on top of it. Valdez is 4,600.
Still not interested.
Still no? Yeah.
I mean, more interested obviously than James at 9K, but it's still just so if Trout's out, it becomes a little bit more appealing, obviously, because you wouldn't have Trout. Otani struggles against lefties. Calhoun's a lefty-lefty matchup, but yeah, I don't know. If Trout's out, I could see getting to Valdez, but it's not like he's a worse play than Daniel Norris.
Right.
But it's kind of the same thing where it's still a really brutal matchup. He's not a pitcher that I think is particularly good. He's not likely to go super deep. Like he's probably going to give you 3 or 4 innings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm there with you as well. Like, why not just play Norris or just find the extra salary, get to Hauser or Musgrove or someone like that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I think that that does it for the 10 gamer. We'll be in Slack. I'll be in Slack around all day. Feel free to tag if you got any questions about the show or anything like that. We will have, let's see, the deeper dive. You guys will be doing a 4:45 Eastern start time, or do you know yet?
5:00.
Okay. So normal start time. Just 10 games, so you guys should be able to run through that pretty quick. You, Alex, and Laffy. And then it'll be Josh Engelman and myself for Live Before Lock. One thing I also want to talk about is, of course, check out the ownership and all that. Ownership projections, rankings, all that stuff. You guys know the deal with that. Go play on Yahoo. Yahoo is the presenting sponsor, so go play over there. Especially get in that rake-free, zero management fee tournament. There are still 66 spots left over, but we've also got a major tournament for golf, the British Open. There is a content schedule up on osmo.com, so go check that out. You're going to be playing some golf this weekend, right, Adam?
Probably.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah.
So we've got good content, and I won some tickets into the Millie Maker. So, once again, I'm going to plan on taking down $1 million in a sport I know nothing about. But we'll see.
If you know nothing, you can't talk yourself off best plays.
Oh, that's the perfect part. You just play. If you have a ranking system or whatever, you just play whatever it gives you, and you just hope that you bink.
Yeah. So my best golf week this week or this year. I DM'd a friend at like 2 a.m. when I was finishing my golf lineups just to confirm that the guy that I had 25% of was in fact a golfer in the tournament, and then he went out there and won.
Wasn't he like a couple percent owned? And
it was like Casey Connor or whatever.
Yeah.
Corey Connor.
Yeah, so Osmo.com will put you on the right plays, even if you don't know anything, or at least that's the idea. So thanks for joining, guys. And feel free to give us a like on your way out. It does help us out directly and indirectly. It makes us feel good. Also makes us look good for the bosses. And helps you long term as we continue to do this kind of content for free. Any last words, Adam?
Nope.
Good luck tonight, guys. See you back for the deeper dive at 5 Eastern.